Welcome back to the Better Men, Better Ball Player podcast. I'm your host, Trey Cobb. I want to thank you for joining us here on our 92nd episode of the podcast, where we get a chance to talk to Gerry DeFilippo of Challenger Strength in New Jersey. Coach DeFilippo is the head trainer, owns and operates Challenger Strength. He serves as a strength coach. He also serves as a strength coach for the Jersey Hitmen, orchestrating programming training for 8 different Hitman teams of all ages. We get into the conversation, talk about also how he's starting to train girls, getting into multiple sports. But since founding Challenger Strength in 2016, Gerry has worked with over 100 college-bound professional athletes amongst multiple sports. Numerous articles has been published. He's had numerous articles published by EliteFTS, Muscle and Strength and Elite Baseball Performance. He's certified by the industry legends Joe DeFranco and James Smith. As a certified physical preparation specialist, he specializes in athletic performance, pre-movement preparation, strength, power, speed, core training, program design, mental toughness, all built on the 7 pillars of athletic performance. Aside from being certified physical preparation specialist, work with athletes, he's also an ISS certified personal trainer with a background in personal training and general fitness. This guy is a no doubt follow on Twitter. He's going to give you great things to show, great things to implement, and give you great things to think about in terms of how you're training. Absolute great follow. Follow him on Twitter at Challenger_ST. Follow him on Instagram, Challenger Strength. You can also check his podcast out at Muscles Management, wherever you check out your podcasts. Check out his website, challengerstrength.com. And none of this would be possible, and I got to give a big shout out to our sponsors, Netting Professionals, Will Miner, and Guide Netting Pros are improving programs one facility at a time. Netting professionals specialize in the design, fabrication, and installation of custom netting for backstops, batting cages, dugouts, scoreboards, BP screens, and ball carts. They also design and install digital wall graph padding, windscreen, turf protectors, dugout benches, dugout cubbies, and more. Netting pros continue to provide quality products and services to many recreation, high school, and college fields, facilities, and stadiums throughout the country. Contact Will Miner. Contact the guys at Netting Professionals at 844-620-2707 or info@nettingpros.com. Visit them online at www.nettingpros.com or check out Netting Pros on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn for all their latest products and projects. So here we go. Episode 92 with Coach Gerry DeFilippo of Challenger Strength. It's going to be a good one. We had covered a lot, so be ready. Buckle up, and here he is, Coach Gerry DeFilippo.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say something I've noticed, like having social media, it has just really been funny and fun. I guess you could say both, to see like you put something out there and then like, did you kind of grow a following? Like, I don't know, 21,000, 20,000, whatever it is, followers right now or something like that. Like, did that happen overnight? I'm like, no, it didn't. Like, it's not like Twitter's not like what I hear TikTok is like, where you put out a viral video and the next thing you know, you wake up and you have like 10,000 followers. It's not like that. It's just like a slow kind of grind. It's a lot like training. You have to be consistent and put out good stuff and do the right stuff, and you start to grow, and you connect with people that have larger followings if they like your stuff. Like, there were definitely some people that were helpful for me to grow on there. Pitching into share a lot of my stuff. He's a great guy that I've become friends with, and he's on my show a couple times. So like having people like that like repost your stuff has been helpful. Guys like Kyle Bodie doing the same thing, and Zach Dakin, and all these guys that are like pretty big in the community, and they were I started on there. Like, people might look at me, it's very crazy to me now they even think this is a possibility. People might look at me as like one of those people at this point, but like I wasn't at one point a few years ago, and they were still who they are. So like them sharing my thoughts and my tweets and connecting with me and just being really gracious and really nice and welcoming was definitely a help. So, but yeah, that tweet you're referring to, I put out as I did with phone roll.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Basically kind of signaling for the athlete to stop. And it went kind of crazy. Like I got a few thousand likes, which is kind of a lot in like an S&C post. Like, you see viral tweets all the time. You don't a drill and strength training get 15,000 likes or something. But it kind of went off, and a couple big time coaches, blanking on his name, Brad Deweese. I'm Deweese or Deweese. I don't know how to say his last name. I probably should, but he quoted it, and he's like a big time guy. He's the director of performance for the Jets, the New York Jets. He posted it and put it out there, and that kind of got it some extra traction. So it was just cool. Like I remember, like I went to bed and I woke up to like 500 new followers, which is even a to like having several thousand. It's still a lot to wake up to. So it's definitely a cool app. Like it is really something to grow on if you put the right really good place to network. So I'm thankful for having it as a platform for sure.
Yeah, man. Like I said, I followed you for that, but I just, I said I remember that the next day tweet that you had, and it was super cool because I've always appreciated good content.
Yeah, I think I
Like you
said
said,
something like, "Oh, there's a lot of you that are new here."
yeah.
Yeah. I every so often, like if something like that happens, like 1,000 new people are now following me. I'm like, you're not used to anything I say, and I'm kind of like unique in being so forward and open about stuff.
Yeah.
Respect.
That was, I mean,
So
just thinking about those kind of drills, because I know that's just something that you've done, and you seem to. It wasn't just like a one-time thing,
yeah, we do a lot of that, especially like the last like 6 months to incorporate and emphasize the importance of deceleration and stuff like that. So yeah.
Why have you thought, like, in the last 5 years, deceleration has become a pretty big topic? Like, what are your thoughts there? Like, why do you think that's happened?
So I would say I think it's a lot of the industry. I mean, I think for a couple of reasons. I think one, you can't ignore the injuries and like the non-contact stuff that's happening. And I think athletes are getting more explosive, and every year that goes by, we're having bigger, stronger athletes. Like every generation that goes by, like I remember seeing something, in baseball, the average major leaguer was. I remember reading in a magazine when I was growing up. Average major leaguer in the 70s was like 5'10", 5'11", 170 something pounds, and at that point, I think it was probably like 2005, 2006. I was like a kid at the time. There was a jump. It was 6'1" or 6'2", and like 220 or 215 was like the average size of a major leaguer. So you're talking just from like evolution alone of the everyday person. Like we were just getting bigger as human beings, and it's just through like the training that we're doing and stuff like that. But like also the idea that like, and that example of baseball, more and more large athletes are being welcomed into the sport, and you see it with everything. Like, of just the average player in like the NFL or the NBA now would probably have been world class, generations ago or 30 or 40 years ago, just because of the training that we have now and the ability to develop some of these things that we didn't know how to do back then, or if we didn't know how to do it, it wasn't as mainstream or whatever it is. Like I think that has really increased the amount of output from athletes, whether it's jumping or sprinting or whatever. And if we only focus on that output and we don't really have any kind of ability to stop or stop properly in sports that us to start and stop so frequently, we are leaving ourselves susceptible to potentially more injuries. We're never going to prevent injury, but we can reduce the actively working on decelerating, all that type of stuff in our training. And I think that was like a big part of it, was that half of let's, try to do the best we can to mitigate injuries. And then obviously performance side of things where, we realize, like you look at a sport like football or baseball or basketball, like there is so much soccer, whatever it is, like there is so much starting and stopping where, yeah, top end speed is huge. And, a guy that runs a 4.4 goes up against a guy that runs a 4.7, they're going to have an advantage in football, downfield. But is it as big as you think if the guy that runs a 4.4 doesn't accelerate well, or the guy 4.7 is an exceptional accelerator, so they can get off the line just as well? and they can get going again once working on those qualities and training and having athletes start to get better at it. Personally, like my mindset has really shifted from a point of view of that in their sport. Well, yeah, that's true. They're going to get a lot of that start and stopping and all that kind of stuff. But like we should also work on it. It's going to help them if like in a controlled setting. And this is a big part of why if I get better at those things in a controlled setting, the training is like we're dictating the distance we're doing things, or it's a smaller sample size, or they're not as tired as they might be in sport. If we can't get better at things in a controlled setting, it's going to be really hard to expect ourselves to get better at them in a, uncontrolled setting, such a dynamic, part of team sports in games, right? Or practice, whatever. So I think that my mindset has really shifted upon like, there's a lot of other things we have to do, but like that should definitely be a part of what we're doing. Training is like, that's got to be included in there. Like how I just tweeted that before, like everyone's working on starting, but are we also getting better at stopping? Because a lot of times in sport, we're going to be starting after we have to just stop. So that's something I think we definitely need to make sure that we're, getting our athletes better with what they're practicing in practice.
Can you give us some of those examples? Like, so like, as you kind of gotten onto this new philosophy, like, have you had to research them? Or are you just kind of creating them on yourself? Or are you kind of getting feedback from your athletes that you train?
I got to be honest with you. It's like anything else with me and honestly stuff that we're doing at a facility. Like, yeah, I read things and learned things when I started out, and I did more so back then because I, one, had more time, and two, I didn't know as much as I've learned over the course of working with actual athletes. But I think it's been really just a combination of like you gotta think about sports with a lot of this stuff. So the idea that you look at a sport and you say, okay, like what is prominent in terms of movements that we're seeing, in these sports? What is really occurring? So in baseball, like I'm going to see a lot of lateral movement occur where the athlete has to move laterally and then stop. Like infielders have to move laterally, maybe plant and then throw across the infield, like laterally and be able to stop. Other sports like a football player needs to be able to run, stop, run again. Like you just look at a lot of those movements that are happening in sports. We have the TV on, there's games on, and what's occurring, and then okay, like this isn't really anything too groundbreaking. Like if we're gonna do 5-yard sprints, 10-yard sprints, why not that we really, really focus on, getting to that 5-yard or 10-yard spot and nailing the breaks and working on like lowering our body and breaking things down and doing it effectively, right? Are we exposing the athlete to those high intensity decelerations, which is big because if they're not exposed to them, they might get hurt doing them in a game. We're also working on the mechanics of it for effectiveness of getting an edge on your opponent, but also for safety of reducing injury likelihood, not blowing at a knee. So I think you just have to look at it from a simple perspective of just understanding that if we're doing a 10-yard sprint, we could do a 10-yard sprint and focus on a hard stop at the end. And then you just kind of expand it from there. Like my thought process was, all right, like I've worked a little bit on stopping and I've increased the distance in which I'm taking off, which makes it more difficult because I have higher speeds. Now I can work on starting again. So now the next phase of that would be and they have to get going again from that position that they were in. So that's adding another layer to it. And then once you kind of get that, that's more of like the really controlled environment where they're not reacting to anything. They're just kind of stopping at a designated spot. You're now starting to add those type of drills that in the tweet that you referenced where can we make these things a little more reactionary? Where now not only are they sprinting and stopping at full speeds, but they're going to have to process something happening to know when they have to stop. And that can start, again, it's all going to like weight training in general. You're always going to have a baseline, like a middle, and you're going to have a progression from there and a regression from there. So if my baseline of working on change of direction and agility was runs and then I say stop and they stop, like that's my baseline, right? Well, then how do I progress that? Well, I can add an opponent or an athlete that's going to move in front of them, that's going to stop them. I can roller that they're going to have to watch that foam roller drop, and that'll signify when they should stop. I can roll a physio ball in front of them, and they have to avoid that. Like, and then how I can regress that is, okay, there's no reaction from whatsoever. Before they even sprint, they're going to know the spot they have to stop in. So it's like the same idea as strength training, where I might progress a push up, and I might add some weight to it, or I might add a slower tempo, or I might do things like that to make it harder, or progress it by saying, okay, we're going to do a barbell push up because we're not strong enough yet to do one on the floor, or we're going to do a negative only on a push up because we're not strong enough to push ourselves up from the floor yet. It's the same idea as strength training. Agility, you can progress and regress it, but just like have a part in your, or a point in your mind that you look at as like that neutral spot. Like that's kind of the neutral standpoint. Well, how do I progress from there? Or how do I regress from there? If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So my another question that I have is just thinking about how often do I do that? So do you have classes of kids that are ready to be pushed, or do you think every time that should be like should the progression be like just during a workout where okay we start, because it's very similar like skill acquisition, like from like as baseball, the baseball side of things, we're trying to get, we will block it out and say, okay, you're getting 5 fastballs, you're getting 5 curveballs. Now you're going to get fastballs and curveballs, and then I'm like going to go totally random. So it's very similar even to that too. So I guess my question is to you, like, do you progress them? Do we progress them every time that you run them? Do you like to work on deceleration randomly, or is that something that you're building up to, and then you're out there for a certain time?
Yeah, I would say when I have athletes that first start training, we might just work on starts and things like that, and not even get into it right away, just because they're very new and I'm trying to work on, like you mentioned, skill acquisition, trying to work 15 different things at the same time is going to be kind of tough. And I do look at it as like, if you have an athlete that's very slow, I don't think it gets to be, it's something that needs to be as mindful until like they get to a point where like we talk about all the time of earning progression, or what I have away from a simple program if they're still getting results with it, or if they're just starting out. Like I have a 12-year-old that comes in, we might do a couple weeks of just starts in their sprint just to kind of get that down. But I do want to, mindset has changed to where I do want to add those things in earlier and more often, because building an athlete's starting ability up for 2 years and never working on decel is going to be pretty crazy when they have to actually start to work on it, and they're shooting off the line and really quick and everything, and then like they have never really actively worked on decelerating. I think it's something simpler with the younger athletes. From a progression standpoint, it might go from starting with a simple 5-yard sprint and stop. Then we go to a 10-yard sprint and stop. And then we're adding stops and then starts again. Like that is kind of how I would progress it. The younger athletes we work with, it's going to be more simple. So I think like they're going to just benefit from, start and stop and not getting too complex with it. Whereas the older athletes, we say, you need to add this, context to it, of like reacting to an opponent or whatever. When you're working with younger athletes, sometimes it can be more beneficial to, we talk about self-organization, right? Getting them to do things that, or do things that put them in the positions you want them to get in, that don't from them, because it's kind of, they're young and they're not going to be able to really do a lot of things from a cueing standpoint that an older athlete might do. So you say, put this sled on, and the sled itself get you in the sprint positions we want you to get in, versus giving them 600 coaching cues, which they're 10 or 11 years old. They're going to go in one ear and out the other, unless they're a really special athlete. You could do things that like, hey guys, let's tag, or let's do this. Like just certain things with younger athletes that are going to get them better at like starting, stopping, avoiding each other, is saying, okay, here's this drill we're going to do. This is here, you're reacting to this, whatever. Like you're going to have more success, in my opinion, just getting those 10 or 11, 12-year-olds just to get them on the turf and say, okay, guys, like, you're going to start on one end, you're going to start on the other, and he's going to run towards you and try to avoid you, or he's going to do this, whatever it is. You got to just make it more simple for them. As our older athletes progress, I do look at it as early in the off season. We might just say, hey, let's get just back to some regular sprints, just get going again. And then as we kind of progress along in our plyometric training, we start moving to more depth jumps, which is like, landing and being able to handle ground forces. We start to cycle of training on just like regular sprinter starts and just building our ability to get off the line a little bit early in the off season. And then from there, we're gradually moving along that progression that I've kind of detailed when it comes to the deceleration drills, starting as basic as a 5-yard start and stop, and adding, starts after the stops, adding in reaction to it, and just kind of going from there as we go in off season.
Matt, just a couple thoughts, and this is really, really good because I think it's so valuable because people always talk about lifting, and like you said, like it's just like strength training, but we go out in there just maybe run poles or maybe just run, if you're working in the gym, like in your high school gym, you might just be doing sprint work on like basketball sprints. So I think this is in terms of a program, coach. If you had an hour practice, are you doing this for 15, 20 minutes? Is this half of your workouts? What would you, or is this on top of the hour, maybe strength training that you might be doing?
Yes, definitely on for our older athletes who might be dividing things into like a, you know, speed day on day one, strength day on day two, etc. We're gonna probably focus on, let's say we have an older athlete, we'll start with that. They have a speed day separated, like as day one, and then they have a strength day as day two, or upper lower, whatever. They're gonna be spread out a little more than the younger athletes, kind of like a full body where they're doing speed both days. But anyway, we're going to have them start out with the regular sprint work. So when it comes to this type of stuff, I tend to lean more towards doing regular starts and sled sprints and stuff like that first, and then leaving the decel stuff after, only because I want them to be as fresh as possible for the earlier sprint, because our focus is be as fresh as possible and be able to have as high as we can. I'd rather not tire us out and then go to our straightaway stuff where we're trying to build our max output fatigue. So I kind of look at it that way. It's like you get in, you warm up, you start out with your regular sprints first, then we move towards our deceleration work and stuff like that. So that would be, the biggest thing is just making sure, in my mind, we do the regular speed stuff first and then progress to the decel stuff afterwards. And then we would go to our plyometrics, and then our whatever weight training we might do on a speed day would be after that. And then the other thing I would say with a young athlete is we are probably going to just have, speed to start their session, and then maybe some decel work, and then plyos, and then strength training. If a young athlete's coming in 2 or 3 days, just have a full body throughout that week. So they're not having an upper lower split or a speed day on day one, a strength day on day two. It's going to be like a similar schedule, because size. You're not worried about like, I'm sprinting them twice or 3 times a week. It's too much. They're 10 or 11 or 12 years old. They're not 17 at a crazy high output with their threshold. So like I look at it that way. You can probably do the same sprints 2 or 3 days a week with strength training. So that's kind of how I think of that. If that makes sense. Like the older athlete, it's on a speed day. It's sprints. With a younger athlete, it's going to just get mixed into their general programming we might do just after their first initial sprints.
And can you explain, just so I'm clear, like the difference why there, like why you're all continuing to do with the younger kids and not with the older kids?
Why we have a more consistent approach?
Yes.
I just think they need to be exposed to everything. I don't think their output is high enough to where they need to be separating speed days from strength days. They're doing goblet squats and dumbbell push-ups, not 500-pound trap bar deadlifting that might impact their speed day type of stuff. Like I think I'd separate it more so because of that. And then as the athletes get older and progress, they're going to get to a point where they need to separate and focus on things more. So an athlete's going to need to focus on acceleration only on one day, or they're going to need to focus on top speed only one day, or on one day. That is going to be where they're going to have to dial in and zoom in on one aspect. Like that one training day is going to need to work on one attribute. They're going to need to work on, flying 5s or flying 10s and top speed mechanics and plyometrics that are more vertical in nature on a top speed day, because we need to zone in on that specific quality of building their top speed. And then their second speed day of the week might be on more horizontal variations, their 10-yard takeoffs and sprints and heavy loaded sprints, because we have to work on acceleration. So that's kind of like why we would start to separate is those athletes are advancing, and now we need to kind of zoom in our scope on particular attributes versus when they're younger, we're kind of just trying to touch our brush on everything, every wall of the room, so to speak.
More of a foundation.
Yeah, like and like I said, they're not so old and advanced and have such a high output that they need to separate things and focus stuff like that. Like they're going to benefit from doing the same training program 2 or 3 days a week and touching all of those areas as many times as they can throughout a week.
Now, would you also classify as quote unquote the younger athlete, maybe being a freshman or, like you said earlier, the kid that really slow, not able to no, that's not true. I guess that's not really true. But I'm just thinking like what would you say, quote unquote, will be a younger athlete? Because like in a high school program, when you have freshmen to seniors, guys who are trap bar deadlifting 500-600 pounds, but then the other kid has never even touched it.
Repeat that again. I lost it for a second. So you're saying,
yeah,
say that again.
I was just thinking, like, quote unquote, what would you deem as like the younger athlete? Because I think
it's training age. I think it's more so how long have they been training than it is, how old are they? So I could have a 15-year-old that's never touched a weight before that might be doing a similar program as a 12-year-old because they just have never trained before. Versus I might have I've had some 15 or 16-year-olds that are doing some things that I had kids in college doing because they're training at such a young age that they are ready or in need of the more advanced type of thing. So it really just depends on how long they've been training, looking at training age versus their actual age, and just making sure that they're at a point where they want to do things, the basic stuff, at a high level. 2, are we starting to see that their testing numbers like verticals or sprint speed or whatever are not progressing at the same rate that they were before? So maybe it's time to start to look at some things or make changes. But even more than that is, do they have a year or 2 of solid foundation under their belt with basics of training where it would benefit them to start to progress? It's just got to look at it from the lens of how much time it's been spent consistently training, more so than what their age is. So that's a good thing that you asked me that, because I think it's important to look at it as a separation of how long they've been training, not how old are they.
That's what I was wondering there, and just kind of what you saw, because I think a lot of coaches are going to have to look at that. They're always going to judge you like, hey, you might need to be over here with this group. Kind of individualizing within a team setting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, I'm not going to sit here and act like we're going to be able to always be super individualized with everything that we're doing. It's just not possible in team settings. Like, it's just not something. I think coaches put a lot of pressure on themselves to do stuff like that, and it's not realistic. So I definitely want to say that. But yeah, you try as long as the athlete been training, and what can they handle and what have they shown that they've been able to do, and look at it more than that than just kind of always making a generalization of every 50 or every 13-year-old is going to be training the same. But like, if that 13-year-old started training at 10 and they built up their ability to do basic goblet squats and push-ups at 10 or 11 years old, and now they're 13 and they can handle more advanced stuff, it's going to be different what they're doing versus the 13-year-old that's never trained before that shows up and starts to train.
Thank you for that clarification. That's great. Yeah, I think everybody finds that, inside their program. To coach, let me ask you this, because I went to, like, going off the bat, I know you have some baseball background. Do you see this, like, let's say a starting pitcher, they got their run, like, after their start, the day after they start and things like that. Do you find this deceleration needing to work like maybe during a recovery day for a pitcher?
I would probably stay away from speed type stuff if my thought process is like, let's try to recover. Like, I think it's simply, you're not looking for that. I think you just threw the day before. I don't think that's the first thing you want to do. If that's like your thought process is, I got to recover and I want to like kind of get them back to neutral with stuff like that's a very, very high intensity stimulus. So I look at it as like, probably, I wouldn't put it in that mindset of like, all right, like deceleration work, or like, it's still speed training. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So when do you find it at all? Is it only during the off season then what you think is the best achieved, or is it when it would be appropriate during the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think during the season you do tend to look at things from a lens of like, we're playing our sport more than we do in the off season. So, I am on a field doing more starts and stops than I normally would in an off season, like especially with a baseball player, like in the Northeast where it's cold and you're not out on a field during the winter, or in football where you're really not playing if you're a high school football player, there's like not AAU football, like you're not playing club football throughout the year. So you're getting all that exposure during the season and not as much during the off season. So that might be a point where I might say, okay, we're going to focus on a lot of the stuff we're not getting. And that's really what you got to look at when it comes to the in-season versus off-season stuff. A pitcher or a baseball player, with a pitcher per se, acceleration is not the biggest thing I'm focusing on, just from a standpoint of like what is useful for them in their sport. Is that at the top of the list? Like they're not, running the bases or fielding balls or whatever. So I would look at that differently because of that. I would definitely look at it as like, look at what they're getting in their sport. If you're training an athlete that, it's a soccer player and they're practicing 4 or 5 days a week and playing a couple times a week during the season, you might not need it as much. Whereas they're not getting any, heavier sprint work or loaded sprint work and acceleration work in their practice or games, or they're not working on their to give them those type of things versus working on, even more decels, because not only that, you have to also look at the amount of volume they're getting. You have GPS, like they have GPS systems now for these, advanced college programs or leagues. You see the amount of like ground contact exposures these athletes have. Like it's good. So like we want to be careful not doing that stuff when they're training, because it's going to just be a lot of volume.
Okay. That's great. So in season versus out of season, depending on what you're getting versus what you're not getting enough of. I guess then you're playing accordingly. And I love how you said that you did came back to saying, because I remember you used the word prominent earlier, is in a pitcher's status, it's not necessarily as prominent. So you wouldn't necessarily be because all I'm thinking about is, guys do sprint work before, maybe after they throw, to kind of keep their legs, build their stamina and things like that. So just thinking about the braking that the front side needs to do. That's all I was thinking about, just kind of more, I guess, more of the.
Yeah, you're going to work on that type of stuff, but I probably wouldn't do it as much in sprinting as a pitcher as I would like depth drops, or people do different med ball variations where you're throwing a med ball and kind of slamming the brakes on that front side. Like,
right.
I'd rather get that.
You get it from there.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, so like those are and then just normal, just to build stamina, just to simple runs, whatever you want to do, but then just really building that kind of like front load off of med balls. Okay, yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. Speaking of med balls, because I know you've touched about, because I think that is a word, and I think that's why things that might have blown up for you too, because it's like because that's when I kind of reached out to you, because I was like, I don't think many people really, like, people talk about like to run poles or not run poles. Like that's like the big thing in baseball, But like what you went through, the whole this like decelerate, like people hadn't even thought about it. You know what I mean? When deceleration is like huge, people are doing wrist weights because of deceleration. We're working on, like I said, the front side and blocking out the leg. Decelerate. Like you hear it a lot. You hear the kickbacks in the hitting program. In the hitting world. About decelerating and things like that. So then you bring this whole thing of like the running part that was like, man, nobody's even thinking about that.
Yeah, you're saying from the perspective of like pitchers, like working on deceleration ability. I mean, that's a good point. I do think the limbs need to be able to handle a lot of force, like lead leg especially, to be able to kind of like hit the brakes and everything. So yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it just comes from like, are we kind of looking at the movements we're training for and getting ready as best we can? Like, are we doing everything we need to be doing in that sense?
Yeah, I like that too, man. I love how you kind of like, just like you think with the end in mind, like, all right, well, here's what we need to do in a game. Are we training this enough? And then let's program for that, and you're kind of being creative with the kind of drills and things like that to kind of get to those special, and as you quote, say, prominent movements.
Yeah, and you want to be careful, like, get too crazy, like the basics are so great. You want to be kind of cautious with not getting too cute with things just because it might not be necessary. So like, as much as you want to watch the sport and get an idea of like what we're get better at, you do want to be careful of not to get too complicated for no reason, if that makes sense. It's a careful balance between the two.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. And that's for sure. I think because especially like you said, Twitter is so valuable. But then all of a sudden we just keep on going on, and you try, and maybe go down a bunch of rabbit holes, and it gets too complicated.
And it doesn't need to be, especially with the younger athletes or the athletes that haven't been training for as long.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is great. Great stuff. Think about MedBall series. Looking at MedBall and the MedBall work that you do. What would you suggest in terms of, or like what are you training for specifically baseball players? Again, looking at right now, I guess out of season, and then if you could break it down during in season, maybe how would that change? What would that look like?
Yeah, so progressing on season wise, it's going to depend on each athlete, but generally speaking, we do like to, get the idea that we're going to be working on more force in terms of speed movement. So heavier med ball throws, things like that, like trying to build force in the context of speed. So that's the first thing. We start like a little heavier in the off season and then progress to lighter variations as we go. We're going to be looking at, kind of torso and build torso rotation and then gradually include the legs, then include weight shift, and then include movement into that. And as we're doing that, we're going to be maybe lightening up the med balls gradually as we go along to eventually move faster. We're also going to be working on a lot of anti-rotational max force. So basically the idea of like those force anti-rotationally, just like we would with strength training. So that's a big part of it. And I think the biggest thing I have to realize is everyone always looks at like, I only need to do lighter throws because I want to move fast. But at the end of the day, you have to understand that in your sport, you're doing the fastest rotations you're possibly going to get. You're going with a bat or throwing with a ball, whatever it is. Like you're rotating extremely fast in your sport. If you're not getting better and more powerful in your rotational output, like we have to start to explore other things that are a little heavier. Like, you can't just always go in there and say, all right, like I'm only going to do lighter rotational stuff in training. Like one as close to the dynamics and speeds of the stuff we're doing in our sport. So why would we try to even replicate that? There's nothing that's going to even get close to replicating it in the training side of things. Even a 2-pound med ball is way heavier than throwing a baseball. Mm-hmm. And the other side of it is if all we're doing is throwing that light baseball and it's, not getting us what we want, then why am I going to continue to do it? Why am I trying to continue to do light rotation if the light rotation I'm doing in sport clearly is in that and more anti-rotational strength work and max force production, like that type of stuff. Like that's going to be my ticket versus, always doing stuff because one, we can't get to it. It'd be foolish to think we could replicate the speed in which we're doing things in the sport. And if we're doing that stuff in sport and not getting any more powerful, then maybe it's time to explore some heavier stuff in our trainings. I want to say that as well. And then when it comes in season, I am of the thought process that if we're rotating and doing a lot of that in practice and games, we're probably going to avoid a little bit of that during the part of the season to focus rotationally to give the athletes a little more of what they're not already getting. And I also want to put in there as a final note that I do think it's overrated, like worrying about getting imbalances with athletes, like baseball players that are, right-handed. So you just do, you do right and left-handed throws because you're worried about creating more imbalances. I mean, their entire sport is dictated on asymmetries and only being one-sided. So one, we'd be foolish to think that, 3 reps of ball throws is going to, undo all the asymmetrical reps we're getting in sport. And kind of want to when it comes to being only right-handed or being only left-handed because, clearly that's what contributes to success in their sport. So those are 2 things that I'm pretty passionate about.
So, yeah, because that's exactly what I was going to ask you about doing things left-handed too. When you were saying
I'll have switch hitters throw med balls from the right and left side, but like I'm not an athlete do it because I don't want them to get imbalances. Like they're pretty imbalanced enough from the thousands of reps they're doing on that one-sided sport. So
yeah, and your thing is just overrated from the standpoint of that it's you're saying it's not going to throw them off. I guess off balance, or you're not going to do anything off just by them doing it just right-handed the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're worried about the 3 reps you did right-handed with a med ball in training, swings they just took or all the throws they just did like in practice, So like if that's not a problem, why are we worried about 3 reps on a med ball throw?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And I
Just
kind of
throw it 6 times with your right hand.
I maybe want to, even promote the idea that I like that because, they're going to need to be pretty successful in moving in that right side position in their sport. So why am I so worried about that? Like they're not going to, get up in their sport one day and just start working lefty.
Yeah, it's a
But
good
above
point.
all else, you're never going to, you have to do 1,000 med ball throws. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're never going to be able to outdo that. Like it's just not realistic to try to get to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the reason I would say that I think some coaches look to do that because there's definitely you see some newer thoughts out there of trying to maybe swing left-handed or throw left-handed, kind of get a feel of what your body's doing and things like that. I think when it comes to feel of a certain thing or maybe try a certain pattern, even the athleticism of it, but maybe that's where that's where it comes from. I don't know, but it's definitely something in the baseball world that is, I think, unique. We have people look to do it right-handed and left-handed. I'm glad you touched on that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that I'm a firm believer in. I used to be the guy that was having guys do lefty and righty for that reason. And then the more you thought about it, it's like, yeah, there's like no way I'm going to ever outdo or, undo the amount of reps that they're getting out of their body. So like, it'd be pretty foolish for me to try to do that with med ball throws.
Okay, thank you. That's great. I guess so. So in season again, let's go think about that. Recovery day for pitchers. Looking at a little bit of med ball work. What would you suggest in terms of is med ball work good during the season? And I guess you touched on it a little bit about like depending on how much I guess we're at in the day. If they've done a lot, you might not do much med work during the season.
Yeah, I mean, for a couple reasons. One, we're confident in their sport. Two, we might be limited on the amount of time we have in our training due to the fact that we are in season. So let's spend as much time as we can in that time that's maybe shorter and that we have less of it, giving them as much as of what they're not getting already. So like we have 80% of what we're doing is the sport itself, 20%, maybe 10%, 15% that's on training. So let's use that time for things they're not getting already. If they're getting thousands of rotational reps in their sport itself, like rotate stuff. And when you look at it from the standpoint of like overdoing it a little bit, like that is a big reason why a lot of these lower back injuries happen. And it's just not healthy to continually rotate like that all year round, which is why, we advise baseball players to take a couple months off and like not play fall ball and like give themselves time to, get away from those patterns for a little bit. Like it could be helpful in that sense.
Yeah, that's a great thought. Super great, Jerry. This is amazing. I because it just opens up a lot of thoughts for me as well. Because I'm thinking, I've come across the term microdosing as I've touched about a few because some people aren't going to have the hour to go work out maybe after practice or this and that. So maybe 20 minutes at a time. And what you're suggesting is, with that 20 minutes, the most important thing is we might need to get a hinge workout in or might get a pull in instead of maybe doing a med ball.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I might not have a lot of time. So,
right.
I just did all that in practice. Like, why am I going to hammer that more? You know what I mean?
Yeah. You would put your the importance on what are the major other major patterns that we're not getting during
well, yeah, and what, like I'm not at the field doing RDLs and hinge work and just getting more robust in terms of like my strength and everything like that. So let me just make sure that I'm doing that, in my sport.
Okay. So do you think that? So what about that same thought there? Because I know we hinge a lot in our sport, and then so we hinge a ton, from leading off to fielding ground balls to just being in a good hitting position. So
yeah, but I mean it's different though. There's no load behind it, and there's really not any of that. That's the biggest difference, honestly.
And the biggest difference is you're saying load behind it from like me throwing 100% max effort on the mound, that rotation. Is that what you mean?
Yes. Well, just like
okay.
the hinge work, like the hinging we're doing in the batter's box with 400-pound load. Load's different than an loader. Like we're not trying to replicate that in our training. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so you're saying with the
like
med ball stuff,
the med ball stuff, we are trying to get doing an RDL with 200 pounds is a little bit different than just moving through a natural hinge and a rotational movement. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, just I love the clarification, Jerry. I just love it. And so yeah, I think that's just great because yeah, like those are we were gonna see the I don't want to say movement, but yeah, but you're saying it's just clearly not with the amount of force, and we're still hitting it. I guess you're hitting the muscles differently, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah. And what would those movements be that you see in a baseball game that we need to train? Like we're not hitting them, but when you would spend your time focusing on, let's say you've got twice a week during in season. What are you hitting on in the weight room?
I think we're trying to lean more towards the strength training type of stuff. We're trying to. I mean, you have to also remember that strength is pretty easier maintained
Mm-hmm.
during that time of year. Like you can not train strength directly for 3 to 4 weeks, and it's going to be something that we can kind of maintain a little easier than speed and power. But also remember that during our sport, we're getting a lot of sprint work in. So we are leaning more towards get the strength training stuff in and make sure we're getting it done, and just kind of trying to stay away from um, you know, focusing too much on all that stuff that we're getting in our sport. I do like to focus on heavier acceleration during here just to make sure that if we are doing speed work, we aren't really getting any heavy accelerations in during our sport. So it could be a benefit to continue working on that. But like we're keeping it pretty basic. We're trying to stay consistent, touch on the basic strength movements versus the off season. We might work things a little better, et cetera. But we're trying to use those couple days that we have, make sure one, we're healthy and we're good to go, so we're feeling good, not pushing it too much to the point where we aren't healthy, but also remembering that it is the in season, but we're still trying to make gains. So that's kind of like where I'm with that is just still trying to push the envelope a little bit and make gains because the in season part of sports is a very thing, so we need to be careful about instead of just simply trying to maintain.
So I'd love to get into that, Jerry, is because that's one thing I have thought, because what I'm wondering is how do we get the gains? Because just this is my thought of me, my challenge of, because we all love these multiple sports athletes and everyone says that, you want to play multi sports. That's great. And I'm on that train. So then I'm also the challenge is when do those kids get these gains, Jerry? Is when do they do that if they're going from football, basketball to baseball, and then they're trying to play a big circuit, in the
I think
summer?
that's just part of evaluating where you are as an athlete and where you're trying to get to. And, if you, are somebody that is, advancing through high school and you have the goal of becoming a D1 baseball player, you just don't stack up and you don't throw hard enough or hit the ball hard enough. And maybe you have to make a sacrifice and say, all right, I'm not going to play basketball or I'm not going to play football this year because I need to just dedicate myself line to having uninterrupted training time and do what I have to do. If you're a younger athlete, you're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Like you need to just be diverse and playing different sports, avoiding burnout and becoming a really good athlete. But at a certain point, you need to evaluate whether you are in a position to achieve the goals that you have. And if maybe you need to focus on that one particular thing, if that's what you're trying to get to.
It's a great point. It's a great point, Coach. It's a great point. Because yeah, like I just have a hard time because, like you said, we're still trying to make gains, and I'm sitting here like talking to this one. Here's a freshman. I know a freshman playing varsity football, probably getting a chance to play varsity basketball, and then he's gonna, of course, play baseball, and then we're gonna go. I'm like, well, when is this kid getting stronger or able to possibly? He's always in season. He's always in season lifting. Microdosing, maybe 20 minutes here, 30 minutes here, so he doesn't get burned out. When is a kid like that grow? When is he able to make these gains? Is he still young enough? I don't know. Like I guess that's my challenge, Coach.
Yeah, it's no, it's a hard question to answer. I don't think anybody has a direct answer to it. If we did, we'd be, solving a big problem. It's got to be just case by case and dependent upon like, does the athlete really want it? Are
Yeah,
they? I have an athlete that has literally played baseball since he was 10 years old because that's exactly his goal was to play college baseball, and he knew that he was physically, underwhelming, and he needed to get tools to where they needed to be. He knew if he didn't do that, he got so cases like that. But if it's what the kid wants and they're the one pushing for it, then it's fine. If they're getting forced to do things, then it's another thing. Like I will give athletes the advice that, you tell me you want to not where they need to be, and you're not naturally talented enough to get there. Well, I think you playing 3 sports a year at 16, if that's your goal, I'm going to tell you that you need to make a change. But
there you
that's
go.
got to be your decision at the end of the day. I'm only going to push you there if you're telling me you want to get to a goal, that's my answer to think what'll help you. I'm only going to push you in that direction if that's what you're telling me. If you're not that kind of person and you want to play those sports, I'm never going to say that to you. Go do what you want to do. If you don't want to play, hockey, baseball, football in college, and you want to just, have fun and be an athlete in school, I'm never going to push you away from doing that. That's just, it'd be foolish. So that's kind of where I look at it.
That is awesome. Like, that is so real. That is so real. It's not this oh, we love multi-sport athletes, this and that. That is the realest thing that I have heard on that take of multi-sport athletes and not being one and specializing. That is real. Because what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you will specialize if, like you said, you're 130 pounds wanting to be a Division I baseball player and you throw 78. Well, if that's what you really want to do, then yeah, you need to put all your eggs in that basket. Is that what you're saying? Or
yeah, and yeah, if that's a decision that you are consciously making and that's where you want to get to, then yeah, at a certain point, playing basketball and football is not going to help you throw 90, throwing 78. Talk to me all you want about competing and being diverse, whatever. Aaron Judge played 3 sports because he's 6'7", 280 pounds, and a freak athlete. Yes. So playing 3 sports didn't make him that. He was that, and he was able to play 3 sports. Yes. In fact, at a high level. He didn't have to work all offseason to be able to hit the ball 400 feet. And he was really powerful. Now, he had to work once high school was over to get to the level of mastery to make it to the major leagues, but he didn't need to only focus on one sport throughout high school to have a shot at making it to Division I baseball.
Right. Yeah.
All state and be the power forward on the basketball team because he was that damn good.
Right. No, I think like you said, and it's a lot of things now. Like, it's a case by case basis. But I think you hit a lot of hit on the head. Is this what the kid wants? If the kid's all about it and they're going in the weight room or they're the one going out to practice, and that's what their goal is, then and all of a sudden, yeah, they're, like you said, they're kind of like undersized, I would say, or don't have the really the numbers that even warrant that kind of look. Then yeah, you have to make that decision. But if not, and you're not really, and you, like you said, you want to be a student, you want the experience, then yeah, play all the sports you want and enjoy it and have fun. So I think that was so real, and it was such a very, very good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's the approach you have to take to it is to not try to have emotion tied to it, just look at it from the facts and understand that, causation versus correlation. Did the multiple sports cause the athlete to be who they are, or were they able to play those sports at a high level because of the athlete that they were gifted to be and have the genetics that not everybody has? So that's kind of how I look at it.
Awesome. Just switching gears here, last little bit of topic here as we get into a little bit, because I just again, always kind of following you. I loved your content, and you're talking soon, and you're seeing a lot of this now at the force plates is the vertical power stuff. Because one of the things you just talked about was improved vertical power output is a great indicator of success for rotational athletes, which we are. And you said hitters, pitchers, golfers, etc. Just wanted to touch base with you about that. Because like I said, you have given a lot more light on the speed work along with just the deceleration of it. And then when do we now put in this vertical jumping, those kind of things as well?
Yeah. I mean, so we're doing our vertical work and our plan after our sprint work on a speed day. If we have a speed day separated, if we're doing, like I said, the younger athletes, they're going to sprint and then do jumps. I kind of order it like in that sense. It's speed work, then it's jump work, and then it's strength training. That's kind of how I separate things up like that. We're focusing on box jumps. We're focusing on measuring vertical output and seeing if there's improvements in that. It's kind of like the process we go through, and then we can get even more complex from there as the athletes get older with static jumps versus regular counter movement jumps, and determining whether or not the athlete is getting a lot out of that with speed or more some from their strength. But realizing just across the board as we've gone through this, how valuable vertical power is for rotational athletes.
How do you are you literally just starting to test? Are you just testing the straight vertical or using the plates as well? I'm thinking about most high schools are not going to have it. So what would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, we force plate. We've been using our just jump mat, and it kind of gets the job done. And I'm not saying we'll never get a force plate, but like it just wasn't something I could see spending thousands and thousands of dollars on when we're getting really good results from something that's not as expensive. Yeah. Maybe someday, but I'm this up on my own. We're not some facility that's backed by millionaire investors and just great equipment. That's we have a jump mat with very technology and fairly reasonable in price, it's like $600. And you can get a lot done with it if you kind of understand the process that goes into it. I think there's a lot of people out there that might even have force plates and really even know how to, don't always look to just go get the fanciest things. Like, you can get that stuff. Learn the reasoning behind the test you're doing and develop the testing protocol and all that kind of stuff. And then get the equipment. Like we did velocity-based training before we had a tool to measure the speed of the bar. Like we were going off percentages of maxes and stuff like that and really understanding what it did and then getting the VBT stuff versus like people get this VBT equipment, just strap it on a bar, cool, look how fast the bar moves and have no idea like when to go heavier, when to go lighter, what the speed even means and how to program it. So
you're saying learn the reasoning behind the test, get the equipment.
Yeah, like develop an understanding of the concepts you're trying to use in the process and the different methods, and then you can start to hone in the specifics of it and how effective it is as you get equipment. Like getting the equipment first and having really no clue, I think you can learn a lot from being resourceful without the equipment early on as like a way to get better as a coach.
Right, that's awesome. Because you just went the velocity based training, the VBT. I'm just curious. So, are you do you train? Who is a good candidate to do vertical based training for velocity based training?
I think somebody that own technical proficiency, their strength movements, and they have really really good mechanics with just basic loading and movement and strength and the strength training mindset and like the just 1 to 5 rep range and just moving really well. And I think an athlete, I don't have a timetable on it. I'm not gonna say, oh, it's got to be a year, it's got to be whatever. Are they getting to the point where getting their deadlift higher and higher isn't contributing to vertical jump gains? Then okay, maybe we need to start getting a little more complex with using in that sense. So I look at it as one, just the technical proficiency and the mastery of that, and then two, just the standpoint of, are we testing things? The testing is giving us certain feedback. It's showing us that the improvements we're seeing in X isn't contributing to as much of the improvement as Y that was once happening. So X needs to change a little bit, and maybe the change we're going to need is not going from 400 to 450, but moving 220 even faster.
That's basically going back to the same principle as you said. Why would I continue doing this rotational thing when it's not giving me the results I want?
Yes, in a sense, yes.
Yeah. For velocity based training, yeah, because I mean that's, and so the thing is, the person who would not be ready for that will be people who are basically just starting to get in the weight room, people who are not young enough to really have those big outputs. I guess basically you would say a velocity based training. Would you, as it would say velocity based training athlete, the person who's not ready? Well, I guess I don't want to say not ready for deceleration work because you're really trying to build that foundation. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking about the person who's not ready for it, which is really the guy who's not proficient in those movements like you talked about. And if they are, I guess steady making gains.
Look at it this way: doing velocity-based training with someone not ready that can't execute just regular strength training would be like having an athlete who doesn't even have good deceleration mechanics do this crazy reactive drill and trying to stop and start, like making it really, really, really chaotic. Where we need to just work on basic mechanics of stopping. So, like, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Oh, that was a lot. That was a lot in an hour. That was a lot.
Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you think it was good, and hopefully your listeners get something out of it. I definitely had fun. We did cover a lot. That was good.
We went over a good bit, man. Hey, so speaking of just people getting your content, man, what's the best way to get in touch with you, follow you?
Yeah, so Instagram, we're at Challenger. Twitter is Challenger_ST. They limit you on the characters you can use for your Twitter name, so I wasn't able to do the whole Challenger strength back in the day. I just started kind of posting a little bit on TikTok, which has been fun. We're just Challenger strength on there as well. And that'll kind of connect you to everything. And then if you want to check the website out, .com, it has more ways to get in touch with me directly via email if you're looking for training or just want to get in touch. I answer as many people as I can, even in my DMs, but that's not always the easiest thing to do either. But yeah, those are my socials, and I also do have a podcast, Losses Management. We have great guests. I do solo episodes where I kind of just go through various topics, a lot of the stuff we just talked about, stuff like that. So those are definitely good places to find more about me. And
Yeah, your muscle and management, is that just on Spotify?
Spotify, iTunes, like all
Spotify,
major
iTunes?
podcast outlets. Yeah,
Fantastic. And your website, is it challengerstrength.com?
yes,
Got it. All right, fantastic. I would definitely fully pass it on, especially us Northeast guys.
for sure.
Very sure. Well, Coach, I really appreciate it, man. That was a lot of fun. And like I said, that was a ton of stuff, and I think we're going to be able to really help out a lot of people for sure.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy I was able to come on, and obviously I look forward to staying in touch. And we'll talk more shop soon.
Thanks for sticking with us here. I knew some of the audio was spotty, so I appreciate the patience. I appreciate hanging with us because I knew, even just for me, like going that conversation, it actually kind of helped me like really focus into what we were saying, what we were talking about, because he was giving out some great information, stuff that I was really wondering, stuff how I can make programming better, things like just better thoughts of encompassing a whole program from the speed work to the deceleration, acceleration, who to do it, what groups to have them in, the sprint work, the speed work, and then from the med ball stuff to the importance of which movements we're needing to make in season, out of season. So just really appreciate you guys hanging on with us, getting through those technical details, technical difficulties. It's just part of the process, and it's part of just the reality of the rawness, authentic podcast that we're all about. Guys ask me all the time, we must be able to get the main goal is a great conversation, and it's a real conversation. And today's just audio was a prime example of that. So appreciate you hanging on. Sorry if it was difficult and frustrating. It was just part of the process and seeing where we're at, and just being authentic and raw and about just getting better and having a good conversation, doing the best we can with our technology. So just loved how he talked about all those different things, from encompassing his whole program and talking about in season versus out of season. Love the conversation we talked about with what to do in season, how to help people make gains. And I really, really loved his take on specializing as well as being a multi-sport athlete, and how that's very dependent on a person's goals, who they are, where they're at in their life, because there are certain times where you need to specialize. And I believe that because there's just no one size fits all. That's one constant we've heard across the board. So continue to reach out to him, challengerstrength.com, at challenger_ST on Twitter, must follow, and on Instagram at challengerstrength. So again, Coach DeFilippo, thank you so much for your time. Thank you guys for hanging on with us here. Appreciate it. Until next week, keep getting better.